Black-eyed children. As a kid, I had always heard legends of the black-eyed children. I liked the anxiety of the thought, the adrenaline that raced through me when it got told. The story goes like this. The cabin was surrounded by snow, and the blizzard raged on. When you think about the cabin, you think it is in the middle of where it was in the 20s or 30s, but in reality, it was 2001. The cabin was located on a piece of property about a mile away from a large town. The couple was a young couple in their mid-20s. They were huddled together with hot cocoa, watching some charisma movie, the name of which I have forgotten. As they watched this movie, all cuddled together, they hear a quiet, faint knock, followed by a soft, "Help! I need help! It's so cold!" The couple looked at each other, confused, as the husband slowly got to his feet and opened the door. He opened the door to reveal a small, frail little boy in ragged clothes. He was shivering, and he was looking down, avoiding eye contact, as he said, I need help. Can I please come in?" Like any normal person, the young couple let in the little boy. They gave him some hot cocoa and asked where he lived. He didn't answer their questions and just kept his face down. The couple just figured he was shy and didn't push him too hard, making sure he was warm. Once the couple had finished their movie with the little boy, they got him all set up to sleep on the couch. They told him where he could find them if anything was wrong. Before they went to bed, the little boy looked at the couple. His look made them stand still in shock, for his eyes were pure black, not a speck of white showed through. Unnerved, the couple went to bed, figuring it was just a birth defect. A week later, the couple were found murdered in their bed, their throats ripped out, covered in blood, with a look of horror on their face. They found the woman's diary telling the story of the black-eyed child. Never let a child in your house. Make them look at you first. Once a black-eyed child is in your home, you're dead. They cannot enter a home without permission. Be safe out there. The children in the village. There's a village in the hills of Maine, quiet and sleepy, it would seem. But behind the charming and rustic facade of this tucked-away village lies a curse. At least that's what some people are calling it. As I've heard it told, as the day gets later and night gets colder, you better make sure your home is secure, windows locked and doors bolted, and make sure a fire is burning in the fireplace all through the night, because you may hear a rapping on your door, a tapping on your window, or hear the sounds of footsteps on your roof. Whatever you do, my friends, don't be frightened, but also do not open the door. Do not go to the window. Do not see what is on your roof, and pay no attention of their pleas and cries, for it is the children, and they want to come in. Not any children, mind you, but the black-eyed children that haunt this village and cause a path of hurt and decay to whomever is foolish enough to open their door. They'll beg you to come in. Do not let them. They'll plead that they're cold and they're hungry. Do not listen. They'll say that they're lost and cry uncontrollably, but show no heart. Close the door if you know what is good for you, or a curse will beset you and whoever resides in your home. It took a while for it to set in with the people of the village. 10 people lost their lives before the rest of the village caught on. There's still skeptics, though, as to all the deaths appear to be accidental by nature. But the rest know. They know those deaths were no accidents. Every instance, it was reported that every victim had given shelter to one of those damn children just days before their deaths. They're out there, waiting, ready for their next victim, out in the night with the blackest of eyes, like doll's eyes. Shh! What is that I hear? A knocking at the door. There comes one of them now, waiting at your doorstep. Black-eyed children. Have you ever heard of the black-eyed children? They used to live in wooded areas long before men started knocking down the trees, but since have moved to parks, fields, and even the occasional backyard. Sometimes they can be seen playing in the dark, far away from the other children, like shadows dancing in the distance. But eventually, after their presence has been accepted or forgotten, they'll wander closer toward the other children. They call their names or play games with them, but you don't think anything of it. You've seen those children at the park every time you come, and you forget that you haven't ever seen them with parents. When you bring one home, you won't know it, because by that time, it's too late. Eventually, the body of your own child might be found, or the remains at least, buried haphazardly beneath a tree or floating in the river like a piece of discarded driftwood, after the other children feed and their eyes have been taken and replaced by the black lumps of coal, just like the others. The one you brought home won't even look like yours, but that's a part of their charm. They are masters at blending in and seeming like they've belonged there the whole time. After all, they have your child's eyes. Your friends won't know. Your neighbors won't know. Their teachers won't know. All you'll be left with is a distant feeling, like déjà vu, that something was different once. Black hole eyes. Ruslana had black hole eyes and hair dyed the color of rust. She would tell your fortune in the crooked alcove beneath the bleachers, $5 a pop, surrounded by cobwebbed mulch and the sculptural remains of old Coke cans and vape pens. Her clientele consisted mostly of girls who believed in astrology and boys who believed they'd get lucky. But the only thing she touched was your hand, running a careful fingertip along each crease. The light searing off the bleachers painted her smooth brown face in diffuse stripes, like ripples foaming over a muddy stream. Her eyes were black stones in the shadow of the risers, lids lowered in concentration. Last week's worries will soon be meaningless, she'd say, and you'd get a 95 on the calculus test you were sure you'd bombed. You'd better listen to your heart not your parents, and you somehow found the courage to confess to your crush in the boys' locker room. It was confidence work. Platitudes broad enough to seem evident in hindsight, coupled with those black eyes that absorbed everything. A tense flinch, a leftward glance, the remnants of nail polish scraped away along the cuticles. The last Friday of every month, you cut class to see her. It helps, somehow, to hear the future from someone else's lips, like it's a thing that can't be whisked away by the next turn of the wind. Will they find out? You ask, the same question each time. The $5 bill is limp and pliant in your palm. What I did? She never asks what you did. No, she says, her fingers light on your hand. The same answer each time. Your shoulders sag. You look up, and Ruslana is still watching you. The light is beginning to shift, her face gone dim and formless. It's past the last bell. I'm sorry, you feel the need to say, that I haven't come by much since summer. The memory still makes you flinch with embarrassment, her shaking her head, turning away from your touch. She had looked different, beyond the gloom of the bleachers, the light turning her dark orange hair into the last blush of sunset. It's fine, she says. She doesn't let go of your hand. Her grip is warm and tight. Things change. She had kept her eyes open when you kissed her, her thick black lashes, tawny skin like a shroud, those inscrutable eyes that let no light escape. She had kept her eyes open when your hands wrapped her throat, anger, silver, and blinding, until all you could see was those black eyes staring at you, still staring at you, canny and mocking even after her pulse went still. The light shifts again behind the bleachers, and her face is a shred of tracing paper laid over a dirt-crusted skull. Her sockets are caves flooded with shadow, black hole eyes. Don't go, love, she says, as your hand splits the mulchy earth. You forgot to pay. Black-eyed children. This happened a while back, but it stuck with me like it happened yesterday. My buddies and I had been out drinking and finally settled at my friend's house because I was too drunk to drive. It had to have been about 3 or 4 in the morning. Everyone in the house had gone to bed, and I was buzzing on my friend's couch, starting to fall asleep, when I heard a light tap on the door. I got up, looking to see if I could see what it was, when I heard it again, coming from the door. I went to look into the peephole, and I saw 2 small kids dressed in raggedy clothes. Convinced I was just seeing things, I looked at my friend's monitor. My friend had security cameras everywhere, and I could still see them. I was about to open the door until one of the kids looked up at the camera, almost like they could see me, and at that moment, my blood ran cold. The kid's eyes were gone. Where the whites of his eyes should have been, there was nothing but blackness. He mumbled something like, "Can I come in?" Convinced they hadn't seen me, I went back to the couch, listening to that faint tapping and watching the monitor until I dozed off, I guess. When I was awoken by my friend, I explained what I saw. Of course, they were convinced I was just saying things. My friend lived in a kind of rural area. Their closest neighbor was a good mile down the road, so there was no reason for kids to be out that late. I told him I thought the same thing, but I know what I saw. I told him to check the cameras, so he went to do so. The camera facing the door just so happened to cut off, but on the other camera, you could clearly see me looking at the monitor in astonishment. I know what I saw that night, and after doing research about this, I'm glad I didn't open that door. Now, I'm not one to believe these things, but I know what I saw, and I still have no explanation for it. I thought that the black-eyed children were just an urban legend until I met one. If you have ever heard of Cannock Chase in the United Kingdom, then you have probably also heard a lot of ghost stories surrounding it. The most famous one, however, has to be about the black-eyed children of Cannock Chase. I had heard a lot of the stories, but never really believed in it myself. Me and my friends Sam and Becky run a fairly successful paranormal YouTube channel. We mostly film around the West Midlands and in haunted locations. We mainly just do stuff like using a Ouija board, asking spirits to communicate with us, and pretending that we're making contact with them. Me and Becky will be the people on the channel who go out and try and communicate with the spirits, and Sam is the cameraman who occasionally will throw a rock in the background so we can all act startled and go, "What was that?" It gets us some fairly good views. Enough at least that it's a decent source of income on top of our day jobs. We were celebrating our 4th anniversary of doing this YouTube channel, and so we wanted to do a special video. Living in Wolverhampton, Cannock Chase is about a half an hour drive away, so it made sense to do it in such a popular location. We arrived there dead on midnight and filmed for a few hours with nothing happening. During our usual Ouija board ritual, we called on the black-eyed children to make contact with us. We mocked and imitated them, making contact with us, and even had Becky act like she had been possessed. When we were finished, we decided to head back to our car. We were having a bit of a good laugh about the whole thing, and Sam was going to take the footage home with him to edit. When we arrived at our car, Becky noticed a couple of kids, who must have been no older than 15, in the background. They were slowly making their way to the car. Sam made a comment about how that was kind of ironic and a little bit creepy, but we got in our car and drove off without waiting to see what they wanted. I know, kind of an asshole thing to do, but we didn't want to become the victims of a robbery or anything. The next night, I was lying in bed when all of a sudden my dog started going absolutely crazy downstairs. I went down to see what was going on. As I got closer, I remember this immense feeling of terror coming over me. My dog was facing the door, hackles up. There was a knock on the door. I looked out of the window, and I immediately felt sick to my stomach. 2 children, one boy around 15 and one girl who must have been no older than 11, were standing outside. "You must let us in," the boy said. "We need to call our mother." The way that he spoke was not typical of children from Wolverhampton at all. He sounded posh, but something was off in the tone. I can't quite make out what, though. Why do you need to call your mom? I asked. This time the girl spoke. You must let us in, she said. Our mother will be very worried. I felt my hand going for the door. I was terrified. In my subconscious, I knew what they were exactly, but I was almost like in a trance. I was oblivious to my dog going crazy behind me, when all of a sudden, he did something that he's never done before. He bit me in the back of the leg. He bit me so hard that it drew blood. I snapped out of it then. I immediately pulled away from the door. The two came to the window and stared at me. Their eyes were black, completely black. This time they spoke together. You wanted to speak to us last night, but we couldn't catch up with you. You must let us in. It won't take too long. I remember grabbing my dog and running upstairs. The knocking continued all night. It was getting louder and louder, and more furious as the night went on. Only when there was daylight did they stop. I immediately called Sam and Becky and told them what happened. They told me that the same thing happened to them, too. But they couldn't snap out of it. They let them in. I asked them what happened. They said the kids walked around the house a bit, and then they left. They said that the whole time they were there, they also felt this immense sense of terror and doom. We never did upload the video to YouTube. Doing so just made it feel like if we'd done that, it would have been inviting them to come back. A few weeks later, I got a message from Sam's brother on him and Becky. They had been involved in a car accident. They had been driving their Canic Chase when they lost control of their car and ended up wrapping it around a tree. They didn't make it. I have no way of telling for sure whether them letting the black-eyed children into their house was the cause for this, but the fact that they did and that they died near Canic Chase, and I didn't, makes me think that maybe if I had let them in, I would be dead too. I still get nightmares of them. I still sometimes worry that they're going to stand outside my door one day and ask me to let them in. I wake up in the middle of the night screaming, terrified. I spend hours at night debating whether to take a peek outside of the window, because if I do, and they're there, they may see me. But the thought of not looking is equally terrifying, because what if they're there, just patiently waiting for me to slip up? Well, I won't do that. Do you hear me? I won't. I've taken precautions now. I've gotten myself some more dogs. Lots of dogs, in fact. Because if one of them can stop me from opening the door, maybe half a dozen will scare them off for good. And I never leave the house without them. They follow me everywhere. Some people think that I'm crazy, but I'm not crazy. I'm just being safe. Because they're not going to get me. I promise. I swear. They're not going to get me. They won't. Black-eyed children. My friend and I were sitting up one night, having one of our insomnia talks. It's around 3 a.m., and our topic switches to one of my favorite things to talk about, paranormal and cryptids. He says the thing he has heard about that he does not believe in at all, but it creeps him out, are the stories of black-eyed children. I ask what they are, but he says that if he is going to sleep at all that night, he isn't going to go into detail, and I should look them up the next day when I'm not planning on going to sleep anytime soon. I get home from work the next day around 8 p.m. and start looking up stories about these children and creeping myself out. An hour or so later, my cell phone rings. Caller ID on the screen says private number. I answer, and on the other end, a child asks me, "Why did you call?" Chills immediately run down the back of my neck and down my arms, and I reply, "I didn't call anyone." The child then says, "Yes, you did. Why did you call?" I tell it that I didn't call anyone and not to call me again, and promptly hung up. I immediately checked each window and door and sat there on my couch for a few minutes, mentally replaying what I think is the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me. My Aunt Polly had a story to tell about black-eyed children. Ever since I had an experience with a child who had black eyes, and learning that my father had a similar experience, I've been sporadically pursuing information on black-eyed children, reading weird stories and asking people I know if they have any stories to tell. The answer is almost always no, and I don't think I ever really expect it to be yes. I'm just surprised that this is even a thing. I mean, black-eyed children is a Wikipedia page. I had no clue that this kind of story is a more than once occurrence, and that there are patterns to these experiences. In any case, I would not be writing if I didn't have some sort of strange new tale to tell, and this time it comes straight from my Aunt Polly. My aunt lives alone. She once had a son with a man she was not married to, but he died months after being born. Polly lives by herself up on a hill tucked in the trees. I've been to her house lots of times because she lives so close. I'm sure she gets lonely, so I see her from time to time. Polly always struck me as kind of kooky, which is totally fine. She talks to her pet cat a lot, watches weird TV shows, and she talks, sometimes, about how she goes to see mystics and fortune tellers. But I figure most of what she does is out of boredom. She's in her 40s and probably has to make her own fun sometimes. Recently, we invited her to dinner because I'm going back to college soon. I haven't seen her for a while, not since before my own weird little incident, and while eating, I considered bringing it up. I knew it would be weird, but I was interested to see if Polly had ever dealt with anything like that in her life, and it wasn't out of the question. My dad had a run-in with a black-eyed child, after all. "Something weird happened to me recently," I said. My mom, who also knows about what happened, and my dad gave me looks, like they were unsure if that's the kind of thing they wanted to be discussing at dinner. They both knew what I was getting at. I told Aunt Polly the whole story, and she was silent through all of it. She just chewed thoughtfully. "I still don't even know what was with that kid," I finished. "That's certainly pretty spooky," she remarked. and that seemed like the end of that. But she appeared a little bit estranged, and after dinner she told me her story. Mom went to do the dishes, Dad went upstairs to do work stuff on the computer, and I sat with Polly to watch TV. I have a story like that, she said. I looked over to where she was sitting and realized she wasn't paying any attention to Jeopardy. She was looking at me, and had been for who knows how long. You do? Yes, it happened a while ago. I never really told anybody because I didn't know what to make of it. This is what Aunt Polly said happened. It was early November 2012, and she was up late watching a movie with her cat, Chelsea. Chelsea is fat and snuggles people like she is a lap dog. So when Chelsea's hair stood up and she suddenly slinked off of Polly's lap, Polly didn't know what to think. I'd fed her, and she was acting the same as always. She just got up and left all of a sudden, looking like I'd offended her or something. Polly remained on the couch for several minutes until she heard meowing coming from the laundry room. She found Chelsea in between the washer and dryer, shaking miserably and refusing to come out. Polly's arm was reaching into the gap to try to fetch Chelsea when there were several knocks on her door. Halloween was a couple of nights before, so I thought maybe it was a few people trick-or-treating. I don't know. I just grabbed a bowl of candy and went to the door. She opened it wide and was met with 2 children, a boy and a girl. "Happy Halloween," she said. But the kids weren't dressed up or holding buckets or anything. They both just stood there, looking into her house. The girl was shifting uneasily, peering around me and sizing up my house, she said. I asked if they were okay. "Did the cat go away?" the boy asked, lilting his voice. Polly said it sounded fake and wrong. "Excuse me? There aren't any others around here," the boy said, to no one in particular, and then he smiled. "Telephone?" At this point, Polly was kind of scared, and she asked if they needed to use her phone. "We need to call them." Polly was about to go inside and call somebody when the girl, who still hadn't spoken a word, tugged at her pants. She stooped to her level and she spoke quietly into her ear. She sounded absolutely terrified. "We need to get inside, Polly." Polly froze, and the young boy turned to stare into her eyes and grin unrealistically and almost unnaturally. Polly said his eyes were undoubtedly completely black. Polly stood, went inside, and shut the door very quickly. She locked it up and secured the rest of the house as pounding sounded from her foyer. Someone was frantically drumming on her door and yelling, but Polly said the voice was neither the girl's nor the boy's. She called the cops, who arrived almost half an hour later. All they found were footprints that led into the forest behind Polly's home, and they chalked it up to a freak occurrence and said they'd check with people in the neighborhood and with any local missing children reports. Nothing turned up, and Polly did not hear from the police again. However, she did say she found footprints circling her house for months afterward and found evidence of a makeshift bed in her gardening shed. Thank you so much for joining me. You can also find me on Instagram at duchessof.darkness or Twitter at Duchess of Dark N2. Also, please send me your stories or poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. Until next time.